why it is important, and how you can actually apply that in the end. A little bit about myself. I'm Alex Waleczek. I was born in Germany. I live in New Zealand for 8 years now, and that's roughly as long as I work with Tableau. I'm the analytics practice lead for Merkle, which is a very large global UX consultancy, Salesforce and Tableau partner. I'm a little bit of a private data nerd, and what you see in the middle is a elevation map of New Zealand built out of 3,600 Lego bricks that currently hangs down in my living room. I run the Auckland Tableau user group. I run a monthly virtual catch-up for the Tableau community. I'm a 2-year Tableau ambassador and sort of active all around the community, really. Now, what is UX? It's really sort of, it's hard to find a clear definition online. If you look it up online, you find sort of a lot of contradicting explanations, and even professionals don't really agree in terms of what metaphors can be used. I will not really dive into too much like the details of UX because I'm personally not a UX professional. I'm not trained in that. But what I would like to do is sort of give you an overview of UX that you can start going down the path and learn a little bit more and know sort of the basics of it. The main thing that always comes up when you talk about user experience is how it relates to user interface design. There are different ways of how you can look at them and how people say they relate to each other. What I'm going to use for this presentation is something that I like most because it doesn't pitch them against each other. It really considers them as two sides of the same coin. And I think that's what I quite liked about it. And that is that the user experience informs the user interface. So depending on what experience you want to create for people, you need to design your user interface accordingly. And the other way around, the user interface really drives the user experience. If you have a really bad user interface and you don't really know where to click or what to do, your experience is obviously really bad. If you have a great designed user interface and it just flows through and it's very clear what you do next, your experience will be very good. Now, to bring that back into data visualization, I have one example from Kimberly Scott. She participated in the Iron Viz competition in 2022. She's based in Melbourne, and that was her entry to that. And it talks about, well, the data set that she used is about the literacy rates in different countries. And I think it's quite easy. Like we all have created KPI dashboards where you just create sort of a chart that shows that a rate goes up, a rate goes down, and that's about it. Now, what she did is she brought it down to sort of a personal level, where her parents were from Cambodia and they immigrated to Australia as refugees when she was a little girl. So she really connected that to her personal experience and how her life might have changed if they stayed in Cambodia with a low literacy rate, with a low income, maybe no job at all, versus now living in Melbourne, working in data, and obviously having a lifestyle that sort of relates to that. Now, the whole dashboard could be full of charts, but if you actually look down the dashboard, there's barely anything. Now, you can expand it a bit and get a little bit more information, but the main point is really sort of the gap between Australia and Cambodia, and that really drives the experience. And for a user, it's much more relatable and it's much more interesting, I find, for myself to actually see what that means on a personal basis rather than hearing that a rate is higher in one country than the other without really knowing what that means. Now, there are different combinations of how good UX and bad UI or bad UX and good UI, how that could feel in the end. And I think we all had experiences where we went to a website. It was really well designed, but it was a horrible experience because, I don't know, if you clicked a button, there was always an error and you didn't know where it comes from. Now, in data visualization, you have that as well. Like you can create these kind of dashboards And it won't be really useful. I think if I think about my own journey and the journey of many others, I'm pretty sure many of us will have created these kind of dashboards when we started off with Tableau, just because most of that is the defaults. The legends and the filters are on the right where they are by default. The tables, that's the default table layout. The axes and the labels are the default. So it's really not surprising that a lot of us end up with these kind of dashboards. And it's also not a tool problem, because obviously it's done in Tableau. But just because you do something in Tableau doesn't mean it's great, it's easily usable, it helps people to see and understand data. And I think if I hope all of us, if we think back on our journey, how we learned Tableau, and maybe how we still use Tableau, or how other people, or how we see other people use Tableau, we can agree that just using Tableau doesn't make you data driven and gives you the tools to actually utilize the data as well as possible. Really, what it is, it's a problem in education, knowledge, and experience of the developers. Now, why is UX important? And I'd like to talk there about a sort of a design paradox. Like, it's really hard to design something really well, but if you design something really well, people will not remember. People will only remember something that's designed badly. Case in point, if you probably all had the experience of walking through a door and pushing or pulling while you should have done the opposite. And that's all sort of, well, that's stupid. Like, why did that happen? And you tell these stories, while on the other hand, nobody ever said, oh, that door was exceptionally easy to open. I knew exactly that I wanted to push it. No, we just walk through, and that's about it. Now, again, if we bring that back to sort of product, dashboard, solution design, that's not necessarily a problem of requirements definition. If you look at that teapot, if we look at the requirements, we want a vessel that can hold hot liquid and you can pour it out. Well, that teapot fulfills the requirement. Nevertheless, the user experience will be horrible, because you will likely burn yourself with the water. And users, if you give them a solution like this, they will still use it. They will still work with it, just in a way that is not good for them or anybody else around them. And in this particular case, well, you can just wait an hour or two for the tea to cool down. But obviously, you have cold tea afterwards, and who wants that? Yeah, Tom has seen some dashboards like that. The other example, sort of a real world example, is something like that, where you can clearly see where somebody designed that and thought they were really, they did something really nice with sort of that curved path. And all the users said, no, I don't care. I want to go from A to B. And I even accept a muddy path, a slippery path, something where I might even twist my ankle or get completely muddy, just to save like those 2 seconds, 3 seconds on the path, just to stay at the other end and wait for 5 minutes for your friends to turn up anyway. And the solutions in both cases are really easy. They are the same, in fact. You just need to listen to the user and really understand what they want to do. And universities did that when they created campuses in the past. They put the buildings in and didn't put the pathways in for a semester or two for the students to walk around and then identify where they walk. And you don't really have these shortcuts anymore, because they're just not needed. It's exactly what the user wants. So how do you apply user experience design actually to your practice, to your processes, to become more data driven? We already established that seeing and understanding data is not enough. What we really need to do is we need to be able to take action. It's not enough to have a car in our garage. We need a key. We need to be able to drive it, and we need to be able to take a decision. Do we want to go left or right, and then act on it. And if you look at the typical dashboards that are currently in use in many organizations, they are typically not actionable. If you get a list of all purchases of a customer, what do you do with it? For it to be useful, you have to have it ranked, you have to have it aggregated, you need to know when it was. And sure, if you get a table, you can do all of that yourself, but that's not a nice user experience. In the other hand, if you get a sorted list with the current spend versus the expected spend of a customer, and you see that the difference is actually quite high, it's easy for you as a salesperson to say, okay, call these people that have a high difference, and see what's wrong. Maybe they have shifted requirements, maybe something was wrong with our product, and we try to push that. Something that people might disagree, but I really think that KPI dashboards are typically not actionable. If you are a sales manager and you see that your month-on-month or quarter-on-quarter sales are down, what do? You can go to your salespeople, whack them over the head, and tell them to sell more. But usually that doesn't have the impact that you think it would have, or that it should have, that you want it to have. If you get a prioritized list of opportunities by the likelihood for them to close, though, again, I as a salesperson, I can focus my effort on the opportunities that provide the most value for me and the company, and that's something that's actionable, that helps everybody to sort of progress and work towards a target. Now, I think for all of these things, one thing that is missing for any of these solutions is empathy, and that's not really the I feel bad for you type of empathy. It's really genuinely understanding what drives the user and what they want and need to achieve. If that's actually applied through the whole development and rollout process, and that usually takes a lot of the problems out of the equation and really provides the user with something that is really valuable to them. Now, what I created was a bit of a canvas that anybody can use in the typical requirement definition process. Again, you'll get a link at the end to download that. But that is a bunch of questions that you can ask that are more contextual, not in terms of what exactly needs to be displayed, but how do user access it? What do you want? What do they want to do with it? And if you have that along with you in the development process, that hopefully helps you to actually build this empathy and understand what the user actually wants to do. Now, if we want to apply that to Susan in the beginning, who we talked about in the beginning, if we talk to her, what she really needs first and foremost is she needs to be able to qualify and close opportunities as fast as possible. For the purpose of this exercise, it doesn't really matter if she qualifies or closes the opportunities as long as they are out of a queue, because either way, it helps her to focus her efforts on other things. If they can be closed, well, they are gone, and she can focus on more on other opportunities. If she can close them and win them and sell something, well, that's great for her target and the company. So that means it needs to be in real time, because what use is there if I have my opportunities from yesterday, if something happened throughout the day. And if you remember, it's a high volume kind of business, so there are opportunities or leads coming in every day. She needs to have the actionable opportunities, what's most useful for her to work on and what provides the best value. And she might want to look at her targets, but more sort of in a secondary manner. It's like, oh yeah, that's interesting for me. I already reached my weekly targets. I can do some admin, or no, I'm way behind. I leave the admin for next week and focus to close more opportunities. Now, that's the kind of thing you should tease out in the definition process, requirement definition, or whatever you call it. During development, user experience has a lot of the same concepts as user interface design, data visualization design, in terms of pre-attentive attributes and these kind of things. The ones that I highlighted here is sort of the context. Where is the user? What does the user do when they use your solution? Do they have to switch context? Do they need to move from, for example, the Salesforce CRM, open a different browser tab to go to Tableau to find and open the dashboard, filter down to their customer and figure out what they do? Or is it right there? User control. A lot of mistakes I see, especially people who are new to Tableau, do is put all and any filter on the dashboard just because the user might need to look at that. If we can establish what the user needs to look at, we can get away with those filters. Yes, sure, we can provide one or two if that's helpful and sort of a secondary task for the user. But if I have somebody who always looks after a certain region or after a certain customer, I don't need a customer or region filter in there. I can have that just default to something. And lastly, accessibility. That doesn't really stop at red and green. That considers a whole bunch of things in terms of what font size, what contrast do you use for your fonts, do you put alternative text for your visualizations, these kind of things. Especially if you work in government, if you do something for the public. But even if you work for a large organization, there will be people with bad eyesight. So that's something that you should consider. So in this particular case, one more thing, it doesn't always need to be Tableau. There might be solutions that work better. Now in this particular example, we utilize something that are called list views in Salesforce, which is basically just the list of opportunities that you can order by something. We don't need a dashboard for that. We can do a dashboard, however, to provide her progression against the target, so she can get a clear view of where she sits and how she needs to manage her time. And both of them can be embedded within a Salesforce page, so there is no context switching and there is no different browser tab or anything like that. Now, in testing, of course, you need to do your usual testing that you hopefully do anyway, but there are sort of a couple of things that I think are really important to focus on. And the first thing is obviously functionality, and usually that's covered by the normal type of testing. Does that actually do what I want it to do? Does a filter, when I click here, filter something else that I expect it to filter? But then there's usability. How do people actually interact with it, and how easy is it for them to use it? And the easiest way to do that is just sit behind somebody and see somebody use the dashboard without any explanation. Because you won't be always there to explain to a user how to use it. So it should be pretty self-explanatory. And very quickly, you can see if they do the same clicks over and over again, or they try to figure something out and get stuck. That's usually a sign that something's wrong and you should change something. That might not mean that you did something wrong. It might just mean that the assumptions that you have were not accurate and don't apply to the users. And lastly, testing in a real life context. The best example I have for that is sort of call centers. It's great if you give a user a dashboard to test it and you sit behind them when there's no pressure from calls. But if you can imagine that there are customers calling that are usually angry, that want a solution to their problem as quickly as possible, it puts a lot of pressure on the user, and that really shows if your dashboard works well or not, and if it's easy to navigate or not. So in our particular case, we can do an acceptance test with Susan, and she's happy with whatever is provided. But in the experience, how she uses it, there are actually things that could improve in terms of where we place things on the page, how we filter down by default, to make sure that she doesn't need to do these things manually. And then lastly, we have the deployment. It's not enough to just dump it on a user's desk and just assume that everything's fine. We need to think about change management, explain to the users why we did something different, why they get a new dashboard, and why it's easier for them to use it. What value do they get out of it, and why should they care about it? Check in with them regularly, just for the first week or two, to see if there's anything that doesn't work. And hopefully you can pick it up as soon as possible, so that you don't end up in a situation where sort of problems build up, and at some point people are just fed up and don't want to use it anymore. And typically, once you roll something out, maybe check in with the user 3 or 6 months after to see if anything changed, because oftentimes priorities shift, and what was accurate in the beginning isn't really accurate in the 3 or 6 months afterwards anymore, and something might need to change, and that might be just small changes in what is displayed or how. So in our example, we do an incremental rollout. We leave the old solution still there just for people to see, okay, if anything goes wrong, we can still fall back on that. We check in with them regularly, and we define that after 3 months, we want to review it, see if anything changed. Now, in summary, the main benefits or the main aspects of that really mean that there's little to no cost for you. Like, you can do that in the existing development process already, with sort of little additional effort. It's great if you get support from your management. That makes it a bit easier to sort of communicate with the stakeholders why you need to sit down with the salespeople and not with the sales manager to figure out what they actually need to do. And it's very beneficial to have cross-functional teams, or team members. So one team member should build the empathy, talk to the client, and develop it. If you have sort of a BA in between to take requirements, things get lost in translation. So in summary, good UX, I think, starts with empathy and really helps you to become data-driven. As a homework, I would like you to download the cheat sheet, the canvas that I showed in the beginning behind the link, and ask a few of your questions in your next project just to see if that's useful. And check in with users of existing dashboards. Just see if anything changed, if they still think it's super useful, or if they actually stopped using it, because you might just invest a couple of hours and provide a lot of value to the whole team. And that's me. Are there any questions about that?
If there's any questions, guys, stick it in the chat. Or ultimately, when the email goes out, you can always email me back and I can forward any questions on to Alex afterwards. But Alex, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Great presentation. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, there we go. Oh, yeah.
So I'll stick around a bit, and otherwise you can find me on LinkedIn or X, as it's called now.
Oh. Excellent. All right, nice. Right, thank you for that, Alex. Appreciate that. Right, guys, like I say, any questions you've got for Alex, either drop it in the chat or send me an email. I can forward it on to him. Again, this video will be made available next couple of days, and I can forward it all out to you. Moving swiftly on, we'll go with Heather Cox from the RAA, who will be talking Magic and Mayhem Dynamic Zone Visibility. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you. All right, let's share this screen and get ourselves underway. There we go. Fantastic. Okay. So interestingly, Alex is talking about those Tableau creators, the dashboard creators, having that empathy for the users, and sort of the inspiration for our little story with dynamic zone visibility today is kind of come from that other direction. It's about educating the users on how to use our dashboards and our adventures in figuring out how to do that. So now this is going to work for me, isn't it? Fantastic. Okay, so yes, as Rob said, I am Heather Cox, and I'm a data and BI analyst here at the RAA, an organisation that I'm quite sure that our Adelaide-based user group is somewhat familiar with. So I'm working all around Tableau, creating dashboards, but also managing users and projects and folders and lots of those server administration tasks. Sometimes described as the boss of Tableau. But I also support our little Tableau community here at the RAA. I'm also a data nerd away from work as well, get into a bit of everything, particularly Formula One and the stats that go on there. It's fascinating to watch it all developing in real time. So this afternoon, I'm going to guide you through the magical realm of dynamic zone visibility, revealing the power that it offers us and the secrets of wielding it, while sharing cautionary tales of the mayhem encountered by the brave data analysts who discovered pitfalls and unexpected twists during their earliest journeys down this path. Prior to using dynamic zone visibility in Tableau, I'd seen a lot of passing references to it in blogs and tutorials, videos, those kinds of things. Something I was like noting down to look at later, but always had more pressing concerns, never quite got into it. And I understood what the words meant, but couldn't sort of put it together in a cohesive understanding of the concept, without realizing I had stumbled onto the controls within the layouts tab of the dashboards, but the option sort of wasn't available when I randomly clicked on it, so I sort of forgot it was there and let it go. Wasn't until I needed to make a navigation button appear dynamically that I really got into what this dynamic zone visibility was all about. I was adapting the concept of Mark Bradbourne's Tableau escape room. And if you haven't had an opportunity to play with that, it's something I definitely suggest you go and have a look at. Quite a lot of fun, but there is a reasonable amount of assumed knowledge that was required to interact with it. And it wasn't necessarily suitable for all of our users, so I needed to create something bespoke. So what I wanted to do was have a navigation button appear once all of the questions on this dashboard had been correctly answered, but I was stumped. In the past, I've used sheet swappers to control visibility of sheets. Now, if you've not done this before, the process involves creating a calculated field with 2 or more output possibilities. Often it's going to be controlled by a parameter. When the field is added to the filters of a sheet and set to include one output of the field, if another option is selected, it filters out all the data from the sheet and it goes blank. So if you've got exactly the right kind of visualization and you have your dashboard set up correctly, the sheet will seem to disappear from the dashboard to be replaced by another if that's also properly set up. But I've really glossed over those ifs. Sheet swapping is great for users, but implementing it can be tedious. It won't necessarily work with certain chart types like pie charts or tree maps. You can't use the sheet titles. You've got to find another way to title your dashboards. And you can't edit the sheet unless the correct filter is activated. Like I said, tedious. But by far the biggest limitation is right there in the name. Sheet swapping only works with sheets. It wasn't going to work on my navigation button because that's not affected by filters. So I went to Google, and as ever, I didn't find a direct answer to my question, but I got a hint: dynamic zone visibility. So now, finally, I had to look it up. Now, don't get me wrong, Tableau's documentation on how to use these features is very detailed, but I frequently find that it only starts to make sense to me once I've already actually done the thing that it's telling me to do. So I kind of see this wall of text, and yes, there's quite a lot in there to go through. Often it's not making sense to me because my data never looks like the Superstore data. Superstore is a thing all of its own, but it especially doesn't work for me when the thing I'm trying to do is not the exact thing that the Tableau documentation is telling me to do. So that this particular site is telling me about how to make these sheets appear and disappear. Of course, I'm working with a button, so it's a bit different. But after skimming this and diving into a few community forum posts, I had a reasonable understanding of what I was going to need. So the dynamic zone visibility allows you to use a Boolean to control the visibility of a dashboard object. From any dashboard, you can select an object you've added to the dashboard, from a sheet to a title to a navigation button. Click on the Layout tab. The third tick box from the top is Control Visibility Using Value. If you tick this box, a drop-down appears, allowing you to choose a value. Now, sorry, that's gotten away from me there. Come on, let's go back a slide. Thank you very much. Yeah. So it's only going to show you compatible Booleans, but if you've got them in the workbook, they're going to be there for you to select, and then you can use them to control your dashboard. So we'll take a quick look at this in Tableau and how we actually are going to use it. So if I flip back over to here, first of all, I've got a parameter set up. So my parameter is pretty simple and straightforward. My parameter has true or false. You can create it to say whatever, but this is what we've got for now. And I've created a calculated field that is based on that. So first up, we'll look at the zone visibility one. And of course, it appears on my other screen. This is always the case. So this is just equal to parameter 1. Nice and simple. Alternatively, I created another calculated field that I do want to show you while I'm here. So I've got a data point over here that's including the countries that different Rubik's Cube competitions have been held in. And so if it contains Australia in that name, then we're going to include it. If it doesn't, then we won't include it. So that's our true or false. So those are going to act differently in our dashboard, and we'll see that in just a second. So here we are back on our dashboard. We've got our parameter and our filter over here. So if we take this one and head over to our layout tab and control visibility using a variable, here we go. And we can see that zone visibility calculated field that we set up earlier. What you can't see is that is Australia field. It's not there. We can access the parameter directly, which we may or may not want to do. But here we go. We've got this zone visibility, but not the as Australia one. The reason for that is that there's not a good reason that all of the data is true or all of the data is false. It's true or false in different situations. And so we can see when we have a look at the filter, we've got that all included in there. Maybe a suspicious little clue there for us. But since we've applied our value to this particular sheet, now when we use the parameter to switch to false, the sheet disappears or it comes back. And so we have complete visibility or complete control over that visibility. So I can also add it to this sheet over here. And we can turn them both off and on at the same time. We can also have things resize around it if we get our containers right. And we take our sheets and pop those into here. And we've got a nice navigation button in there as well, just to prove a point. And we'll set that to distribute evenly so we can see what's going on. All right. So just to prove to you that this is a navigation button, I will click on it. So yes, it is working as a button. So now that we have our button and our sheet set in the vertical container, we can see that it will resize depending on which setting we have on our parameter. And I can switch those over. I could just untick the box in actual fact. I can apply the same thing to the button. And we can put the visibility on there. And what do you know? My button is now appearing and disappearing, which is exactly what I was after at the time. So in order to make all of this work in my escape room, I created a calculated field which tested the user's answers and another that then returned true or false based on whether they were all correct. I selected the second calculated field in our little drop-down menu and bam, magic. The button stayed invisible until all of the correct answers were given and it magically appeared and allowed the user to navigate to the next dashboard. So this was so much simpler to implement than sheet swapping. If applied to a sheet, it also controls the visibility of the title, making the dashboard formatting so much more straightforward. And you can edit the sheet without having to control all the filter conditions, set them back so that it's actually having data in it so that you can work with it. However, it works on all objects. It works on images and text boxes and containers. We can add multiple items to a container and control the visibility of the container to hide and display the entire group of items. If you have another set of objects to show in place of those that are being hidden, that can be all added to a different container with the opposite Boolean, because obviously the Boolean needs to be true for things to show. So we need a Boolean that flips the other way. But once that's all set up, it just works. And unlike sheet swapping, dynamic zone visibility, it just has this intuitive logic to it. It's easy to understand. We know what's going on. Now, I'll admit I got quite excited when I discovered this. And my sincerest apologies to my workmates who suffered the consequences of my enthusiasm, that aforementioned mayhem. I do really need to thank them for highlighting the rules, which I will now share with you for using dynamic zone visibility successfully. So in trying to implement it in one workbook, one of the team discovered the importance of those horizontal and vertical containers for the resizing of content. Now, this is not materially different to the way that it works for sheet swappers, but it is something that we do need to keep in mind. If the object you've made invisible is just inside a tiled container, the other content can't move or resize to fill the vacated space. So you're just going to end up with a big empty space. We saw that with the Rubik's Cube example earlier. If we put it into the horizontal or vertical container, we put it into a vertical container, and it was able to take care of that sizing. You may still have trouble if you have a fixed height or width setting on one of the visualizations, on the visualization that's needing to sort of take up all of the additional space when you hide one. So that's something to look out for as well. But it's also important to get those Booleans right. Again, when we looked at the Rubik's Cube example, we could see that is Australia one was not going to work. The most straightforward way to create your calculated field Boolean that you're going to use to control the visibility is to control it with that parameter, as we did. It ensures that the value for true is true or false for all records. A Boolean that produces a different result for different rows of your data can't be used to control the visibility because there's not a clear state, a clear true or false for all of the records, and so it's not able to act on that. If you do need to control the visibility of an object from the result of the visualization, the graph that you've created, you can use the dashboard actions that will allow you to set the visualization to then control a parameter, and that parameter can then control your Boolean and control that visibility aspect as well. Now, the big one, extract refreshes, caused us some headaches. So if you have Tableau Server rather than Tableau Online, this is the one you want to listen to. So after implementing the dynamic zone visibility on a dashboard, another colleague published the result. Until then, we'd only previously implemented it with live data sources or data that wasn't needing those extracts refreshed. So initially, when the Tableau server failed to update the extract, and it was giving us the error message saying that it basically the file was being used by another process, we didn't initially connect it with the fact that he'd implemented the dynamic zone visibility. It didn't make sense to us, and so we probably spent a little bit too much time mucking around trying to figure out what on earth was going on, because we thought that there was a server issue. But lucky, I was able to raise it during a Tableau APAC community catch-up, and somebody made the connection, understood what that error meant. They'd seen it before, and it's a known Tableau server bug. So yeah, it was something that Tableau were aware of, and there was a workaround available, but it's not exactly straightforward. But with the aid of our friendly neighbourhood Tableau partner, DataSpark, Param was able to help us out with that one. We were able to test that solution and then implement it on our production server. And yes, now we have our dynamic zone visibility working beautifully on all of our dashboards, well, those that have it implemented, and we're not having any of those problems with the extract refresh. So if I've done my job right this afternoon, you have all caught at least some of my enthusiasm for dynamic zone visibility. Perhaps you've learned a simpler alternative to that sheet swapping that we were talking about, or you're excited to try controlling the visibility of buttons and other dashboard elements. While I did end on the more challenging aspects of implementing this feature, the context and solutions shared will protect you from experiencing the same difficulties my extremely understanding colleagues have. I do hope that you're able to take away the fact that we were able to solve them all through persistence and cooperation. And if you do manage to avoid the pitfalls I've covered to encounter new and exciting challenges, I really encourage you to reach out to the community for support to get the answer, but not least of all because I want to know about it too. So interested to know if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I think Louise Rand's mentioned something there, Heather, wanting send them your workbook. I don't know if that's something you can do, but there's certainly going to be a recording of this being sent out to you guys when I get it. But yeah, I think there's lots of people very impressed with that, Heather.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to getting the escape room that we've built that has been finished now, and it's going to be shared with the organisation from next week. So we're looking forward to some good feedback there. So far, we've had it tested by a lot of data nerds, which is maybe a biased data set, but yeah, it's should be fun.
Thank you very much, Heather. And also, as a live demonstration goes, that was pretty good.
Oh, good. It's my first
time. Heather, could you stop sharing your screen, and I'll put up the final bits and pieces from here. Thank you, Heather, for that. Thank you very much. Also, thank you, Alex, for that. I'm going to share my screen here and let you guys know, and I'm going to repost this in the chat, that both Heather and Alex are at the Visit Sydney, which is on the 31st of October, the 1st of November. There's a link in the chat if you want to register for that. I believe it's free, but I'm happy to take $10 off anyone as a handling fee. We've also got an event in Perth on Tuesday next week, if you're interested. That's another thing that has been organised. So yeah, it's all on the slides there if you're interested. Like I say, if you're interested. Again, Visit Sydney, 31st of October and 1st of November. Thank you very much to Heather for your presentation. Thank you very much to Alex, beaming in from New Zealand, for your presentation also. We really appreciate that on our little Adelaide user group. Merch giveaway. While Heather and Alex were talking, I've managed to do a little bit of a tombola, and I've got Louise Ryan. So Louise, if you'd like to drop me an email with your details on, my email is this. I'll put it in the chat here. But yeah, you're more than welcome to get in touch with me, and yeah, I'll get some over to you in the next couple of days when I get your details from you. Thank you very much, everyone. And again, Alex, Heather, thank you ever so much for the presentation. Really appreciate that. I think the user group guys have been overwhelmed with that. We will get the video out to the rest of the teams and the people that weren't involved later on next week. I think that's everything. Anything else from you, Alex or Heather?
Nope, that's it.
I'm just watching all the questions come up in the chat, so I'll have some people to reply to, I think.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, is there anything you'd like to go with? Anything now, Heather? You can.
Well, Louise is asking about which version of Tableau I was working with. So initially, up until last week, or up until last night, actually, I was working with 2022.3, and yeah, now 2022.3, and now 2023.1. And I'm not sure how new a feature it is. To be honest, it's all a bit of fun. I sort of stumbled across it. I'm not quite sure when it first came into being, Louise. So yes, but it certainly is in 2022.3.
Rob Nayman's going to come to Sydney. Look at that.
Hey.
Good old Rob. Rob, I think myself and there'll be a few of us over there, so we'll welcome you with open arms. Rob, thank you, Louise. I'll get some over to you. That's fine, Chris. Oh, Tom, have you ever attempted to make a dynamic expanding flowchart using this approach?
I am now. Our params in 2022.3 and onwards.
Thank you, Param. Appreciate that. Nice. Yeah, that's good. Your inspiration, Heather and Alex. But yeah, look at that. That's great stuff from the user group. Okay, guys. Well, if that's everything, we'll give you a couple of minutes back of your hour. Again, Alex, Heather, thank you so much for that. Oh, okay. Louise isn't quite there yet. But guys, if you want to drop me an email, any questions for Alex and Heather, if you thought of anything later on today, robert@dartspark.com.au. I've just put it in the chat. We'll wind up there. Heather, Alex, thank you very much for that. Thank you, guys. And we shall see you in 3 months' time for the November one. All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
See you soon.
Bye.